Now we're going to look at a question in context. So it says Abby mixes baking soda with different amounts of vinegar. She records the amount of time it takes the gases to produce. Gas is produced by the plate balloon. Her data ends up fitting this cubic model. So how long would it take to inflate the balloon with 5/4 cups of vinegar? That's an interesting way of saying 1 1/4 cups, I guess. All right. So 5/4 cups of vinegar. So we're going to be substituting 5 into the function. We can also just graph it using, I would use Desmos for this because it's easier to identify points on the graph using Desmos. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to pause and get that set up. All right, so if you don't know, you can get into a Desmos graphing calculator right on your screen here, hitting Tools, Desmos graphing calculator there. You can do this on your TI. I just think it's easier, honestly, on the Desmos, especially if you're already on your Chromebook. So here's the equation that was given. The question was, how long would it take to inflate the balloon with 5/4 cups of vinegar? So that means the x is 5, and then what's the y? So when the x is 5, let's see. We almost had it. There we go. When the x is 5, the y is 6.26. All right, so that means it would take, when you add in 5/4 cups of vinegar, it would take 6.26 seconds for the balloon to inflate. And they are saying about 6.3, so that's what we got as well. All right, let's look at the next one. So same question, it's just saying now what do the x and y intercepts of the graph mean in this context? Do these values make sense? So if the y-intercept's up here, so 0, 13.16, and the x-intercept is down here, 6.585, and then 0. That's what they got as well. They rounded to the 10th instead of the 100th, but that's okay. So the x-intercept is approximately 6.6. So that means if 6.6 cups of vinegar were used, the balloon would inflate in 0 seconds. And then the y-intercept is approximately 13.2, and that means if no vinegar was used, so the y is 0. If the x is 0, then the y would be 13.2. They both don't make sense, right? Because there's no amount of vinegar that would make the balloon inflate in 0 seconds. The balloon can't inflate in 0 seconds. And then the y-intercept of saying, well, if you use 0 cups of vinegar, so no vinegar, it would take 13.2 seconds for the balloon to inflate. Well, the balloon's not going to inflate if there is no chemical reaction. So if you use 0, the balloon's never going to inflate. So both those don't make sense in the context. So that's why, if you think back to example 4, when you're looking at rates of change over an interval, that's why you might want to, in theory, in the future, if you're looking at a function, only look at part of a function, only look at a certain range of a function, because in this example, both those intercepts don't make sense. So this function is only useful somewhere in between. Okay, let's look at the you try it. All right, so the first, I guess both questions are based off of this function where Danielle's making shoes, or she's engineering a new brand of shoes. So we're going to first answer the question, how much will be earned in profit for selling 1,000 shoes. Notice how X is shoes sold in thousands, so that would be an X value of 1, and then dollars in 10,000s. So whatever you get for the Y value when you graph this, you're going to multiply that number by 10,000 in order to get the answer for part A. And then part B would be looking at the intercepts. So, and then getting them in context and seeing if they make sense. So give that a try and then come back and we'll talk about it. All right, so I did the same thing and I made a graph on Desmos. Let's take a look at that. The first question was how much will be earned in profit for selling 1,000 shoes. So remember, X was in thousands. So right about at 1, you have a Y value of a little more than 14. So let's just say it's 14. Remember, the Y values were in 10,000. So it'd be 14 times 10,000, which is 140,000. So when there's 1,000 shoes sold, the profit's going to be about $140,000. The second part of the question is find the x-intercepts, x and y-intercepts, and then what do they mean in context, and does that make sense? So the x-intercepts, there's actually two. There's one over here and one over here. So the first one certainly does not make sense because you cannot produce a negative amount of shoes. That doesn't. So there's no context for that makes sense, right? This one sort of makes sense. So this is saying, all right, if x is 1.9, let's just say it's 1.9, that means you're making 1,900 shoes. There could be a scenario where by producing more shoes, there's extra cost involved in making them or something, and your profit ends up being zero because cost and income are the same. So, well, maybe not true. We don't have enough information to say this doesn't make any sense, right? So that implausibly could make sense, but that would be what that scenario would be. 1.9 for X and 0 for Y means when you make 1,900 shoes, you make $0. Then the Y-intercept is 0, 10. So that means you're making 0 shoes, and 10 times 10,000 would be $100,000. So when you make 0 shoes, you make $100,000. That makes no sense, right? Because you can't make a profit if you make no items to sell. So that would be the y-intercept, and that does not make sense in context. So again, there must be some range in between that would be more useful use of this graph than getting out to the intercepts. All right, then let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, you'll have the practice available to get started with. Okay, there you go.